What's up, world? I'm Cameron McKinney, and this is Pop Culture Spotlight, a podcast about the movie A Real Pain. Here's a quick synopsis. Two cousins, David and Henry, visit Poland, the home country of their recently deceased grandmother. The film stars Jessie Eisenberg, Kieran Culkin, Will Sharp, and Jennifer Grey. Standout performances. Jessie Eisenberg has long been one of my favorite actors. His strong suit and what makes him unique is he's undefinable as an actor. You can call him a comedian because of Zombieland, Adventureland, 30 Minutes or Less, and The Double, and at the same time you can, and I will say, he's one of the best dramatic actors with The Squid and the Whale, The Social Network, Night Moves, and the end of the tour. In A Real Pain, Eisenberg plays David, who is on a trip with a cousin, Benji, who he used to be really close to, but over the years the two have grown apart. Eisenberg is someone who could have played either role in the film, but I think he chose right. He had to play this character who is nervous being around his cousin and jealous of him at the same time. Eisenberg is not only the actor of the film, he's also the film's writer-director. Eisenberg previously directed the film After You Finish Saving the World, starring Julianne Moore and Finn Wolfhard, which I really liked. However, A Real Pain is a big step up. It's him becoming a master of tone. Jessie Eisenberg is an actor who notoriously doesn't watch his own movies. Here's what the actor had to say about editing his own performance in the movie A Real Pain, telling Olivia Avendin of GQ, quote, "I have developed a thick skin because of acting. I know the worst of what people write about me and my body and my face. I don't feel that as much with writing because it's so less reflective of who I am. The thing you don't like about your nose is the same thing New York Magazine hates about your nose. The thing you read on a message board is the same thing you hate about your hair. That's so deeply humiliating," end quote. Another actor who does a perfect balancing act between comedy and drama is Eisenberg's co-star in A Real Pain, Kieran Culkin, who played Roman Roy on Succession, who was one of the funniest and saddest characters in television history. You see that in his performances in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and in Igby Goes Down. He's both at the same time very funny and someone who can convey extreme emotions on screen. Here's what Culkin told Kyle Buchanan of the New York Times about working with the director who is also your co-star, quote, "The tough part is getting notes from an actor, because an actor is not supposed to look at you and go, it'd be better if you did it like this. That's a huge faux pas. You get smacked in the mouth for that, and every time he did it, it threw me. Literally, my chest would pop out and I'd clench my fist and be in a defensive stance and be like, is this bleep telling me how to do it better? Because I got notes for him too. Then I'd realize he was actually really good at it. He would know what the exact little solve was for the scene if it wasn't working. He's also really fun to play with. Let's go back to play, because that is what I think it is when it's at its best. I've heard some people approach the acting thing as being almost like a fight or something. We go to our corners and then we come out and we duke it out in the scene. I have a totally different philosophy," end quote. To me, what is most special about this movie is the pairing between Jessie Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin. It's so unexpected yet so brilliant. I mean, they are so great together. I mean, you want to watch them in so many more movies after this. That's one of my favorite things about movies. I mean, Jessie Eisenberg has been one of my favorites. Kieran Culkin has been one of my favorites, but I never even imagined what it would be like to see them in a movie together, and then you get it with A Real Pain, and it's better than you ever could have imagined. As good as the script may be, I think the strength of this movie is the performances from these two actors. Let's talk about the film itself. I really relate to David Eisenberg's character, who is jealous of big personalities who people are enamored with. I'm quiet like that character, As a human being, you feel almost jealous and afraid of these bigger personalities with the loudest voices in the room. It feels like no matter what they say, they are the life of the party. But what this movie tackles head on is these kinds of people have problems too. They're just better at hiding them. They have a real fake it till you make it type of attitude. Many, and I mean many people will watch the ending to A Real Pain and will immediately compare it to the ending of John Hughes's film Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, starring Steve Martin and the late, great John Candy, and you will probably label this film as an indie version of that film. And a few years ago, a movie called Come On, Come On, starring Joaquin Phoenix, reminded me of Hughes's Uncle Buck. It just goes to show what an impact those films have had on the culture and how cool it was that comedies like those films were touching on topics that still resonate today. Uncle Buck and Trains, Planes, and Automobiles were also just labeled as outright comedies. I mean, we just don't know what to do with comedy films anymore. I mean, is A Real Pain a comedy? Is it a drama? I mean, Kieran Culkin was in a TV show in Succession that I thought was the funniest television show I had ever seen. Yet we labeled it as a drama. We gave it all the Emmys in that category, and we all talk about movies as if they don't make comedies anymore. I mean, A Real Pain is a comedy. It's just kind of without a label. I've always kind of hated the term dramedy, but I think that's what you could call A Real Pain. I think that's a good term for it. The drama element of the movie is that it's a character study about these two cousins and where they are at in their lives. I mean, David is at a completely different point than Benji. He's a father, he's a husband with a successful career, and Benji is kind of lost in life. He's now mourning his grandmother. He's a guy with a big personality, but that only gets you so far. And that's something that I actually found really interesting with the character, is that he doesn't have a job. He's not super successful, because you could also make this movie in the reverse order, that David is the one who's social anxiety yet isn't successful, and Benji is the bigger personality who is super successful. And you could almost believe it in the opposite order as well, because there are those people in life like Benji who can talk their way into making anyone believe that they have the answers to everything. Jessie Eisenberg was in this movie a few years ago called The End of the Tour, a movie that I absolutely love, and he played author David Lipsky, who goes on a book tour with the late great David Foster Wallace. And what David Lipsky wants in life is exactly what David Foster Wallace has. He just doesn't know that it's not worth it. And I think in the movie A Real Pain, his character realizes at the end that he doesn't actually want to be Benji. He would rather have the life he's living than to be the funnest personality in the room. You could take this movie as saying that having deeper one-on-one relationships is more important than being great in front of a large crowd. I mean, Benji is great with this group of people that they're on a tour with, but he doesn't have a deep relationship with his cousin anymore, and the only person he seemingly had a deep relationship is now dead, his late grandmother. Oscar chances. A Real Pain appears to be a real contender this year. Eisenberg could get nominated for his screenplay and for his performance. Culkin feels like a lock to get nominated for Best Supporting Actor. It would be really interesting to see both of these performances get nominated, because Kieran Culkin is really showy in the movie. I mean, he's the life of the party. He's giving a great performance. But then on the other hand, you have Jessie Eisenberg, who's doing more subtle work. So for them to nominate both performances would be really interesting, because in the past, in a movie like this, Kieran Culkin would dominate. He would be the one who gets nominated for an Oscar or eventually win the Oscar. I think it would be a good sign of the Academy to nominate both performances, because the movie does not work without either one of them. And I've read some reviews that make this movie all about Kieran Culkin's performance, and I get that. He's great in the movie. You've recently watched him in Succession. He's become one of the best actors in the last few years, but I think that's overlooking what Eisenberg is in this movie. He absolutely nails this monologue in the middle of the film where he finally shares his feelings about his cousin Benji. I also believe that Eisenberg is playing the character who develops and evolves through the movie, whereas Benji is who he is at the beginning of the movie, and he's the exact same way at the end of the film. I would love to see both of them get Oscar nominations. It's wild to me that Jesse Eisenberg has not been nominated since The Social Network. I think he should have been nominated for The End of the Tour. I would have probably given him a nomination for The Double. I think he's one of our great actors, and I don't think he gets enough credit for being one of our greats. And I think Culkin has a really good chance to become an Oscar winner. I mean, he's already won an Emmy for playing Roman Roy. If you are a fan of what Kieran Culkin has done on Succession and what he's done in this film, A Real Pain, I 1000% urge you to seek out the movie Igby Goes Down. You see everything already there in a young Kieran Culkin. I absolutely love that film. I believe A Real Pain is going to get nominated for Best Picture. I think so many critics have loved it. They've raved about it. It's going to get a ton of Oscar nominations. Could this movie actually win Best Picture? I have no idea. I mean, there's just no clear favorite to win Best Picture. I think Sean Baker's Anora has a chance to win Best Picture. I think Berger's Conclave has a chance to win Best Picture. That's a film that I'm going to talk about on this podcast next week. Or could the Oscars give Best Picture to a more popular film like Dune Part 2 or Wicked? I mean, there are Oscar pundits out here predicting that Gladiator 2 is going to win Best Picture. I just have absolutely no feeling to where the Academy is leaning, and this is after a year where Oppenheimer was the favorite from beginning to end. There just is no clear favorite, and that's a lot of fun, but it makes it impossible to guess which movie is going to win Best Picture, which film is going to gain momentum. I mean, it's always a weird question to ask, is this a movie worthy of winning Best Picture? I mean, what makes a movie the best movie of the year? Do I think A Real Pain is the best film I've seen this year? No. But do I think it's better than a lot of other films over the years that have won Best Picture? Absolutely. I would kind of feel good if this movie ended up winning Best Picture, because it is a really great film. I think the only way for me to look at it as a major contender to win Best Picture is if Eisenberg ends up getting nominated for Best Director. If he gets one of those nominations for Best Director, then I think it's in play for this film to possibly win Best Picture, and that would be wild. And for a movie to win Best Picture, there usually has to be a really interesting narrative around the film, and I think this film, A Real Pain, has that. There's the talk about how Kieran Culkin almost dropped out of the movie. There's also this talk about how he doesn't like to rehearse. He loves to say the lines for the first time the day of shooting. I mean, people are really fascinated by Kieran Culkin as an actor. They obviously have a history with Jesse Eisenberg. What I'm getting at here is I would not be shocked if A Real Pain wins Best Picture. I know how much movie critics love this film. I'm going to be interested to see how much the Academy loves this movie, because I think the log nominations are Kieran Culkin for Best Supporting Actor and Jesse Eisenberg for the film screenplay. But if this movie gets nominated for Best Picture and Jesse Eisenberg gets a nomination for Best Director, then I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility of this film being the Best Picture winner. I'm always interested to see what the success of a movie like this does for the careers of these actors. I mean, Jesse Eisenberg has been a well-known commodity for a while now. However, I think there are people who have not followed Jesse Eisenberg's career post The Social Network. I think for a lot of people, they haven't seen the movies that I talked about earlier on in the podcast. A lot of people were reacquainted with him after the success of the miniseries Fleischman is in Trouble. It's interesting to note that Jesse Eisenberg's next film that he is directing is a musical starring Julianne Moore and Paul Giamatti. Those are two of the best actors on planet Earth. Eisenberg's also going to star in Now You See Me free with the rest of the returning cast, along with newcomers Ariana Greenblatt from the Barbie movie, Dominic Sessa from The Holdovers, and Justice Smith from I Saw the TV Glow. Not to mention the great Rosamund Pike is joining the franchise. Those have always been fun movies, the Now You See Me films, but those additions to the cast has me thinking, are they about to elevate those films to another level? A lot of mainstream audiences have been down on Eisenberg since he played Lex Luthor in Batman v Superman, and that didn't exactly work out for the actor. And I felt like for the last few years he wasn't getting the credit he deserved for the performances he was giving in indie films, and now I love the fact that he's finally getting that well-deserved recognition. As for Kieran Culkin, if he wins the Oscar, I think he's going to be viewed as one of the best actors working today. I mean, he'll be well sought after to be in everyone's movies moving forward. It's interesting that the two people having the most success post-Succession are Kieran Culkin and Jeremy Strong. And yes, those were the two best performances on the show. Kieran Culkin was the comedy. I thought Jeremy Strong, for the most part, carried the dramatic elements of that show. There's a real chance that both of them get Oscar nominations for their work this year. Culkin in A Real Pain and Strong in The Apprentice. What's fascinating about Kieran Culkin is I don't feel like he's somebody who's super interested in being a movie star. He's just interested in the work. That's why I think that he loves Succession, because it was great writing. That's why I think he was in A Real Pain, because it was a great script. This is somebody who is purely just seeking out great writing. I mean, this is a guy who's been in a Kenneth Lonergan movie. Don't expect to see him in a Marvel film anytime soon. Overall, I'm just impressed that Jessie Eisenberg, after only 2 films, has found his voice as a writer-director. Like, you could imagine what his next few films could feel like. Now, he might surprise you, but I think he's really found something special in A Real Pain. The dialogue is there, the mix of comedy and drama, it's all there, and it's something that he can build upon. You could also see Jessie Eisenberg showing up in all of the movies he directs moving forward. He's proven that he can give a brilliant performance in a movie that he directed. I would absolutely love it if Eisenberg has a career like Noah Baumbach, whom he worked with on The Squid and the Whale. I mean, that type of writer-director who makes movies that feel the same and different at the same time. These comedy dramas that are saying something real about the real lives that we are living. And after the success of this movie, high-caliber actors are going to want to work with Jessie Eisenberg. Like I said, Julianne Moore is going to work with Eisenberg for a second time, and Paul Giamatti is going to work with Eisenberg. Now, something I desperately want to see after watching this movie is for Jessie Eisenberg to write and direct a movie starring Andrew Garfield. The two of them worked brilliantly together on The Social Network. I want to see a re-teaming of those two, and I want it to be in a movie directed by Eisenberg. I think it would be great. I think we need it as a culture. I think Andrew Garfield is one of the best actors working today. Eisenberg has proven himself as a writer-director. Let's make it happen. That's something I want to see. One of the cool things that would happen if this movie wins Best Picture is more people would see it. I mean, the movie only has made $8.1 million at the box office, which isn't bad for a movie that cost $3 million. But back in the day, a movie like this would win Best Picture, and then they would re-release it, and then the movie would become a hit. I don't think that's the reality anymore. I don't think you put A Real Pain back in theaters after it wins an Oscar for Best Picture, and then it gets to $40 million. But could this movie make 15 to 20 million if you put it back into theaters after it wins Best Picture? Absolutely. I think enough people would care about a film winning Best Picture to seek it out. That's what's crazy about this Oscar season right now. It feels like A Real Pain has just as much of a chance to win Best Picture as a movie like Wicked or The Brutalist. There's just no clear favorite. No one knows where it's going. What I do know is that A Real Pain is a delightful film that you are going to want to seek out. Jessie Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin form a duo that you are going to want to spend time with. And I think the ending will leave you thinking about people like that in your life, which is the point of a movie like this, is to be relatable. There are people out there who have been these characters in their lives, and then there are some other people who I think who have been both of these people at some point in their lives. The biggest selling point for this movie is that the dynamic between David and Benji feels truthful. Thanks for listening to this edition of Pop Culture Spotlight. I'm Cameron McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Thursday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I highly recommend you check out A Real Pain. Next week on the podcast, I'm talking about Edward Berger's Conclave starring Ralph Fiennes. So tune into that and please rate, review, and subscribe.